Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. Just wanted to give a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. You'll be glad to hear we expect this webinar to last no more than 30 to 40 minutes today, which includes some time at the end, obviously, if there's any questions. So if you do have any questions for us as we go through, please just look to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a Q&A button. So feel free just to drop your questions in there and then we'll get to them at the end. Please also note that we are going to record the webinar so that we can share it with you all afterwards, and you can share with any of your colleagues who choose to. Okay, so firstly, who are you hearing from today? Well, my name's Daz. I'm the head of digital here at Quantum. You'll also be hearing from my colleague Jodie, who is our head of planning, is going to take you through some insights into why it's important we still consider events as key parts of our plans and strategies, given everything that's going on around us at the moment. And you'll hear from Andy too, who is our business director. And Andy's got some great examples to share with you, examples of how to create experiences and events in the post-COVID world. So there's some really nice stuff in there for us to take you through. Really quick, just before we get going, just to tell you a bit about us. So we are Quantum, and we're a brand experience agency based down in lovely Bournemouth on the south coast. And what we're all about is creating really motivating experiences for brands and consumers alike. And whether that's a trade event, consumer sampling campaign, a festival, or even a digital event or experience, and everything we do is designed with selling your products in mind. Okay, and so what are we not here for today? Well, we're definitely not here to be dodgy salesmen, that's for sure. So hopefully you'll see that everything we've pulled together, not only the insights, and reasons to give you confidence that events and experiences simply have to be part of your plans moving forwards. But we've also backed that up with some really nice tangible ideas that you can take away and consider as part of your own events and marketing plans, both for this year and into next as well. And why have they done this? Well, for any of us connected with the experience or events industry, I think everyone will agree, it's been a really tricky time recently. And while the green shoots are starting to appear as people begin to go back to some form of the new normal, it's never been more important that we're prepared to make the most of the opportunity that currently presents itself to us. Now, as an agency that specialises in giving people amazing experiences, we know how vital experience marketing can be, and not just for brands, but for the consumers that you serve too. And at least in the immediate future, we are going to have to change the way we look at creating these experiences for our audiences, especially if we're to continue delivering something that's truly engaging, given all the new restrictions that we're all going to have to face, obviously. So this webinar today is designed to help understand how we can continue to deliver those rich, inspiring experiences that our audience do crave. But how do we do that safely, responsibly, when the new normal begins to kick in? So the things that we will be covering today, well, first up, we'll be diving into why experiences are important in the first place, along with some key trends and how they've been affected during these difficult few months. We're going to unpick the fundamentals of creating experiences, so what makes them enjoyable, memorable in the first place, and show how we can use this to our advantage in a new and exciting way. We'll also be taking you through some really nice examples, as I mentioned, to show you how, as brands, we can adapt to these changes and continue to create those amazing experiences for our customers and our consumers along the way. And finally, we'll cover the important role that your brands can play as we look to the future too. Okay, so before we look at what might happen, let's quickly take a look at what we hope doesn't happen. And as we all know, one of the main joys of our pubs, bars, restaurants, and the on-trade in general are just that. It's the joy that we get from being with family, with our friends, colleagues after work, and spending some much needed downtime together. And we really don't want to lose that. Take the fun and the enjoyment away from these experiences, and we're really not left with a reason to get out and about and to do them. So we need to ensure we keep these experiences enjoyable and make sure that they stay something that we all crave as consumers. And plus, although some designers are undoubtedly doing their best to make the most of this perceived opportunity, I hope we can all agree this really looks more like something out of the Jetsons, and it doesn't quite cut it. If this was the new normal, it would grow old very quickly, and it certainly isn't going to replicate the joy that we're used to experiencing when we go out for dinner or drinks or to events in the future, that's for sure. Okay, so that's what we hope doesn't happen, but let's take a look at what has been confirmed so far. And in terms of cancelled events, it really is quite the list. From the Olympics to Glastonbury to the Euros. These are all usually huge opportunities for brands to sponsor, to activate, to partner with, and to make the most of from a marketing perspective. And that's probably even more so from brands in the FMCG and drinks industry. But it's important to remember that it's not just these huge events that have been affected and that we've lost. As brand owners, I'm sure you're all too aware, this also includes things like food festivals or local gigs or street food pop-ups, all of which cause a big gap in our marketing plans and our calendars for 2020. And because of this, there really is no shying away from the fact it's been a tough few months for the hospitality industry. Taking the UK's 47,000 pubs, for example, alongside every other business in the hospitality sector, all of which have been shut since the 20th of March, which is huge. And sorry to use the buzzword of the year, but it's completely unprecedented too. The flickering light amongst all of the challenges that we face is the fact that finally, as of a couple of days ago, there is going to be an official return to the new normal for the hospitality industry come the 4th of July. And yes, supermarket and online sales have picked up a lot during this time, but it simply doesn't plug the huge gap that needs to be filled. So it's essential we do everything we can to help our outlets and our partners, because without them, our brands, our reach, and really importantly, our sales will also continue to be massively affected too. And although we did get a further update from the government last night, which is great when you've already done your slides for today's webinar. However, that update really was clear. And we felt this quote from Chris Whitty, the CMO, who said, "I would be surprised and delighted if we weren't in this situation through the winter and into the spring." And this really hit home the fact that for all of the will in the world, this new normal that we're going to be faced with, it just isn't switching off on the 4th of July. And the message is clear that we still need to be 2 meters distance from other people wherever possible. So events, simply aren't going to be able to return to as they have in the past for the foreseeable future. So we need to continue to plan with social distancing in mind, and it simply has to play a role in your brand's events planning for both this summer and into next too. Yeah, putting recent months' doom and gloom to one side, we truly and firmly believe that the situation we find ourselves in now, as brands, it really is a big opportunity. And as an agency, we actually feel like it's more than that. We feel like it's a huge opportunity for brands. Yes, there may be less big events to take part in this summer and beyond, but consider the fact there'll also be less big events to compete with and less noise to cut through. So today we're going to share with you some ideas for maximising this opportunity and show you how running even your own branded experiences and events, yes, although on a smaller scale, can in fact generate richer levels of engagement, levels that you simply can't achieve by attending larger national events or partnering with them. Cool. So before we get into that, Jodie, before we go into it, would you better just take us through the importance of those experiences and events for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks ever so much, Daz. So yeah, before we get into the ideas, it's really important that we have a kind of a critical look at experiences and why they're relevant. Why don't we just take our marketing budgets and put them into something else? But also where larger events that give us that really big reach, where they're not an option anymore, what value can a brand find in doing sort of events that have a kind of a lower capacity? Well, quite simply, it's a matter of creating real value for your brands and, as Daz said, for the consumers that we serve. From a consumer perspective, you never want or value something more than when it's taken away from you. It's the basic law of supply and demand, and you tend to find that desire is proportional to scarcity. So we know that consumers are really craving these experiences. And as for brands, in the world that we now live in, the experience a brand creates really is the only way it can differentiate itself. It's the only way that we can really communicate that all important who we are and why we matter in a meaningful way. So these two facts combined with the current climate means that experiences that brands create have never been more valuable, both to the brands and the consumers, which means that whilst the volume of people that you can reach in the new normal may be lower, if we do things in the right way, it can actually lead to far deeper and richer engagement. So actually becomes a bit of an opportunity for us. So just using an example, we've got this data from the USTA, which shows that sort of 60% of consumers that they surveyed were looking forward to being able to travel again. And yet only 20% of those people are holding out for either acquired immunity or a vaccine to be ready. So those numbers alone just prove again that people will always choose experiences over things. And we only need to look at the responses to yesterday's announcement to see that far more people and everyone is missing the chance to get together with friends and families and enjoy those kind of shared moments and those shared experiences. So it's not like we have a job to convince people to take part in our activations anymore. They want them. They're craving them. All they need is permission and to know how to do it safely. So the reality is for brands to win, we simply have to find innovative ways to plug that gap. And the consumers that we reach by doing this will thank us for it. And that will be paid back in share of mind and share of market. There's an awful lot of statistics that show time again that the brands that remain share of mind during downturns really benefit well when the market starts to move into a positive direction again. So I think we can all agree that we will all appreciate that holiday, that sports match, that event even more than ever before when we can finally get back to it. So this is quite an important point, and we put this in just because I'm sure some of you will have a job to do to convince your teams, your bosses, and your colleagues that events are really worthwhile activating either this summer, during this summer, or in the immediate future. So let's just recap the whys. Firstly, because although events might be smaller, engagement can become far richer. So smaller numbers doesn't really equate to less value. Secondly, it's a perfect opportunity to create real, true brand advocates and generate that all-important love for your brands that we're all sort of striving towards. And thirdly, the truth is that other brands will and are doing this, so we don't want to get left behind. So that's all great, but what are we doing about this? How can we evolve and how can we change our experiences? Well, before we get started on how the hows and whys and wherefores, let's take a look at what we use to really create those meaningful experiences. Now, we all know the saying that consumers value experiences over things, but what does that really mean? Well, when we say that we want experiences, what we're really saying is we want to feel something, and creating a feeling is at the heart of really good experience marketing. So to create experiences that change behavior, we drill this down to two fundamental building blocks. Firstly, it's about stimulating the senses, letting people know that something's going on. It's what they see, feel, touch, smell, all of those elements. So like, how do we stimulate those senses in a new and engaging way? And we know that the better we do that, the more meaningful, more memorable those experiences can be. Secondly, we need to give any experience an emotional framework. At our hearts, we are social animals. So in order for us to attribute meaning to an experience, we've got to put it into some form of social context. We need to have a level of interaction, a reference point, a way to share with others, and that basically shapes how successful the experience can be. So why is that important? Why are we drilling it down to such a base level? Well, when we know that these are our two primary building blocks, we can then start to unpick the elements of our experiences and find new and exciting ways to stimulate those senses and create new social contexts for our experiences. So all that's true, but of course we must first and foremost be sensitive to the situation we find ourselves in. Now, obviously we feel that we have a responsibility to create these amazing experiences for our consumers, but we also have the same responsibility to make sure that we keep safety front of mind and that we're sort of doing things in the right way. So to kind of see what dictates how things are going to change and why the decisions are being made in the way that they have, it helps us sort of like get a bit of an understanding as to the factors that can really guide how we can do things safely and ultimately how viruses can spread. So there's two critical ways that that we use to sort of really understand how a virus can spread and will dictate how successful that virus is at spreading. So firstly is the behaviors when we come together as a group. So it's what we do when we're together and how easy it is for one individual to pass the virus onto another, and that to spread within a sort of tight group. Infection rates rise when people are in enclosed spaces for prolonged periods of time. It would also it's also assumed that it's spread via water drops that are being passed from person to person, either in the air or on surfaces. Did you know that, interestingly, statistically, you're more likely to get corona from your spouse than anyone else? So you might want to think about that. But that's only half the story. The second part is around sort of the ability for a virus to spread from one group to another. So if we've got loads of people from loads of different places, the chance of a virus spreading exponentially is dramatically increased. So in broader terms, that translates to the following, which is small groups of friends that have had limited exposure to different groups. Spending time together is relatively and statistically safe. And again, we see that confirmed by the measures that were released yesterday. But big festivals where people come together from all over the country or indeed the world to be tightly packed together, singing and sweating over each other, etc., is a bit of a no-no. Or to put it perfectly, as Time Matters says here, big events are not just worse than small events, they are much, much worse. So we need to consider this when we're deciding how to activate events in the foreseeable future. So that's great. That's a bit of the kind of nuts and bolts of it. But I'm now going to hand over to Andy, who's going to talk to you a little bit about how we can create some amazing experiences in the post-COVID world.
Thank you, Jodie. And, you know, it's an amazing opportunity for brands to do this really well. And it's really about putting their best foot forward and standing out against their competitors, because let's face it, if you don't do it, other brands will. And we've got 5 key areas for you all to think about. And of course, there's loads that we could be talking about today, but we're really encouraging brand owners to frame their experiential planning under these 5 thoughts as we move through to 2020-21 brand planning. And the first thing to talk about is, and it's a big ask, you know, it's time to rethink the role of your event strategy in its entirety. You know, it's no longer about scale and physical reach. It's much more about smaller events, fewer people, delivered beautifully. And by doing this, we'll achieve amazing brand connections and consumer engagements. And it's likely that consumers will be attending less events throughout 2021, as Jodie mentioned at the beginning. And what does this mean? It means that we'll create much greater value on them. So we have an amazing chance to engage with consumers in a way that we never have before. So in other words, the big challenge is stop thinking cost per contact and start thinking about cost per relevant contact. And I think this is really well illustrated on this next slide. And we've probably all been there in some way, shape or form, where perhaps a global team has handed you an internationally signed sponsorship deal and told to activate an event in your local market. Perhaps it's Glastonbury, and no one's disputing Glastonbury is an amazing event with around 200,000 festival revellers. But when we activate at events like Glastonbury, you have to wonder how many people our brand is actually able to talk to. You're up against a huge crowd and loads of other competing brands, and that results in our brand having a really small voice and an enormous amount of wastage. At smaller events, suddenly our presence becomes much more significant and we're able to make our investment work really hard for us. With a smaller crowd, we have a much louder voice, a significantly reduced amount of wastage. So in summary, by shifting the role of your event strategy and targeting smaller events, we achieve 3 really key things. The first thing is less wastage. So we might end up talking to just 2,000 people, but they're consumers that we actually want to be talking to, not the 50-odd thousand other people that also happen to be there. We can achieve better targeting. So by targeting smaller events, we're more likely to be able to speak to tribes of relevant consumers that are all going to the same place. And lastly, we have a much louder voice. So we're not competing with all of the other clutter at the event, and there's fewer brands activating. So all of a sudden, we feel like that our share of voice becomes much richer. And I think a really super example of this is Luna Cinema. And these guys are a really established network of pop-up cinema events. They have 175 events happening regionally across the UK. And actually, each event only attracts around 500 to 2,000 people, depending on the venue. And what we're saying to you is, perhaps in the past, where as a brand, we might look at that and say, you know, are we reaching enough footfall? Are we going to get the right cost per contact? What we're saying is that by partnering with partners like Luna Cinema, all of a sudden, we're able to talk to people in a much more richer and engaging way. And this is another really great example. You might have noticed that on the 15th of June, the government said that drive-in cinemas could continue. And the drive-in are now promoting a UK-wide tour of retro-themed drive-in cinema experiences that's really safe and friendly for people to attend. So by being the 1 or 2 brand sponsors at an event like this, we've got a really loud voice and we can really sing to our consumers. The second of the 5 things is to start thinking about whether now is the time for brands to create their own events. And I suppose the big question to ask here is, why do we activate with big event partners in the first place? And, no one's disputing the role they play. They do an enormous job in helping brands reach relevant consumers, big audiences, and guaranteed footfall. And there's always going to be a role for that. But if we're now saying that smaller events will become king, couldn't we as brand owners do that ourselves with greater effect? And this revised slide shows on the right-hand side what the significance of a brand-owned event might deliver for us. And I think it's pretty obvious, suddenly our voice becomes the only voice and there's absolutely no wastage at all. So all of a sudden, by saying we're going to move into our brand-owned spaces, we have loads of control and loads of impact. And you can deliver something like this in a number of ways, depending on your own budgets and scope. And here's one example. So for Utopia, which is a low alcohol spirit, we launched a pop-up in Shoreditch back in January to support Blue Monday, the most depressing day of the year. And we probably spoke to about 500 guests in this venue in Shoreditch, Benk and Bow. And the point was that everybody that came along could choose what level of interaction they had with us. So some came in to have a complimentary drink of Utopia, others engaged in a laughing yoga session, and some actually sat down and enjoyed some mindful comedy with us. But the point is that in this scenario, that Utopia was very much at the heart of the experience. The next example is actually using an existing venue. So this was a campaign we ran for the Balvenie. It was called Share to Open. And in the heart of King's Cross Station, we invited consumers to come and take a seat at our bar and enjoy a dram of Balvenie Doublewood. And over the course of that day, we sampled around 900 consumers, which arguably doesn't sound like lots of people. But each of those consumers took a seat at our bar, spent around 6 to 8 minutes talking to our brand ambassadors, enjoyed a dram of 12-year-old Doublewood in a Glencairn glass. And so the experience was really rich. There's not many brands that would be delivering an experience like that in the busyness of King's Cross Station. So we had a really nice, small, intimate way of delivering that experience. The third thing is to say, could outdoors be the new indoors? And everything we're seeing and hearing is suggesting that certainly in the medium term, this will be the case. And learning from other countries and cities that have already started returning to some normality, is always the outdoor space that becomes that kind of real premium for brands to activate. Outdoor spaces are also the most COVID safe. So it's likely that if and when government intervention comes back into play, perhaps outdoors is probably the safest place for us to be. And a pretty reputable bar owner said very recently, it looks like outdoor drinking is going to be more prevalent and people are going to shy away from cramped bars for the foreseeable future. And, brands have been doing this for ages. This is Copper Club in London. And, these really famous igloo bars sit quite proudly on the Thames. And there's lots of innovative ways of delivering outdoor brand experiences whilst also incorporating some element of protection from the rain. And another example is some work we've actually been doing with William Grant & Sons in owning outdoor spaces with key customer venues. And I think perhaps traditionally we might be automatically thinking about how we could own inside spaces where perhaps dwell time is more consistent. But there's a real good job to be done in owning outdoor spaces and driving visibility and experience in those areas. And likewise, the Disaronno Fizz Club concept also incorporated some really cool bubble seating ideas to kind of really vary that experience. And you can also bring our experiential and events activity to our consumers wherever they may be. So to support the Utopia pop-up in January, we also commissioned this beautiful Danish bike, which took samples to people in and around Shoreditch and Liverpool Street. And not only were we able to sample around 2,000 people that day, we didn't incur a gate fee either. So it's a really cost-effective way. You know, we just had to commission the bike, hire a couple of brand ambassadors, and all of a sudden you've got a really quick and cost-effective plug-and-play solution. And you may recognize this from the headlines recently, a pub in your own backyard. And you know, who wouldn't have liked this over the last several months of lockdown? But it got us thinking, you know, there's loads of opportunities for brands to develop experiential and events campaigns, perhaps digitally, by offering competitions for consumers to win outdoor brand experiences in their own gardens. And by integrating it with some viral activity, you could apply some digital PR and social amplification to really push this concept much further. The fourth item is all about Phygital, and we ran a webinar on this last month. You may have been able to join us. But Phygital is really important. It's the combination of physical and digital experiences to create really memorable experiences and meaningful connections. And a definition here, if you haven't heard of Phygital before, explains that Phygital combines the physical and digital worlds for an experience that is full of immediacy, immersion, and interaction. And this is really well exampled here for Kopparberg. And you know, Kopparberg's a really exciting brand that aligns itself very closely to music and festivals. And naturally, all of the festival activations that Kopparberg were partnering with this year have been cancelled. So the big challenge was, how do we leverage this association with music through different channels? And so we're running an on-pack promotion through Tesco that invites consumers to win their own festival experience in their garden. And the winner will receive an amazing DJ set in their own home, plus a famous DJ to come and play to them and a select few of their friends, all those in their same household. But to push it further and to integrate that kind of Phygital lens, we're also giving every single entrant into that competition an opportunity to zoom into that DJ set. So they'll be giving an access code where they can actually watch a live stream of the DJ set taking place. So not only are we amplifying our reach in delivering that competition prize, but we're also using Phygital tactics to create really meaningful connections. And lastly, number 5 is content. You know, content becomes increasingly important for us, and content has always been key as part of experiential in making sure that we deliver significant scale beyond the people in attendance. But what we're seeing moving forward is brands using content in a way to really amplify activity beyond the smaller crowds that they might be able to engage with. And we're doing this at the moment with the launch of Hard Seltzer, a new product from Kopparberg. And ordinarily, we would be facilitating high street and city centre sampling in key regions, but naturally we can't do that at the moment. So the way we ran this was to do a digital competition where consumers could apply to receive a hand-delivered case of hard seltzer from our Kopparberg branded Defender. And by doing this, you know, we actually only sampled around 300 people in Manchester, Leeds and London. But we were able to get an awful lot of brand content. So these kind of Instagram posts illustrate the kind of richness of the content we were able to get by having a photographer with us on our own channels. And then this slide shows some of the stories on our own feed, but also some of the earned content that we were able to get with some of our influencers and partners and consumers as a result of the sampling campaign. So there you have it. I hope that kind of summarizes those 5 key points. So rethink the role of your event strategy. Start thinking about hosting your own branded event in your own space. Think about how outdoors could play a big role in your experiential plan. Always think Phygital. Phygital should be the lens that we approach all event activation moving forward. And of course, content. How can we use content to really drive extra value in the experiential activities we're doing?
Cool, thanks, Andy. There's some really great ideas in there. I'm sure we'll all agree, and you know, from an implementation perspective, especially. So following that, really, I just wanted to take a look at the important role brands can play as we look to the future too. Now, one thing that really is key with all these ideas is to ensure we help consumers prepare and look forward to the new normal. You know, we don't want, and we simply can't afford for it to be daunting for them. You know, so how do we do that? Well, first up, you know, as brands, we need to be conscious of creating awareness. Yes, we all know the details of our venues reopening off by heart. You know, we're involved, we're invested in it. But don't assume your customers will know all the details. So we need to tell them. And there are tons of great, quick and easy ways to do this. For example, why not create a geo-targeted social teaser campaign so that your ads are relevant to every venue that you sell in around the country? Or consider countdown ads as part of your PPC strategy so that customers can literally count down the days with us to when these venues are reopening. Another great and very relevant example, given the amazing weather we've had this week, is consider using weather generated ads on these glorious summer days and weekends to make sure that you get the right ads shown to the right people, but at exactly the right time, when the weather's good, when they're heading to the shops, and they're ready to spend. Second up, it's all about creating anticipation, which, let's face it, after everywhere being shut for the last 3 months, hopefully that won't be too hard. But, making sure your customers feel at ease and let them know they shouldn't be scared, but excited about the return, of venues opening and the new form of events. Make sure your customers feel at ease and let them know, why they shouldn't be scared, but why they should be excited about this. Ensure that, they're aware of any restrictions that might be in place, or promote any offers that you might be running for the relaunch. And even promoting wider events from your outlets and partners as well. Like, don't just solely focus on what your brand is doing, but make sure that you're acting as a partner, to your key venues as well. We're all very excited to get back to it and get back to some form of normal. So make sure that your customers are too. And to do this, why not consider digital sampling or digital giveaways? Because if there was ever a time to incentivize customers to try your products, it's now. And plus, with social and digital advertising being cheaper than ever right now, thanks to less competition for it and for the space, then it's a really good time to be trialing advertising and digital in general. Then we want to ensure that we're doing things a little bit different too, because with all the best will in the world, you won't be the only brand team thinking how you can stand out in the new normal. So you need to be prepared, be on the front foot, and importantly, have your brand activations stocked, ready to go, so that you can turn them on instantly and overnight. And the reason we suggest that is because this is all about being proactive. Don't forget that all of the venues and outlets, they have a lot to think about right now. They're probably more concerned with getting their houses in order. So if you can suggest, an event or an activation or an experience or promotion, make sure that is watertight, make sure it's well thought through, it's ready to go, and it can be implemented really quickly as well. And let's face it, we're all guesstimating a little as to what's next. So, understanding what consumers are thinking, not last month, last week, even yesterday, but now is going to be absolutely key to successfully activating as well. How do we do that? Well, as an agency, we do that through social listening tools that help us to do that. They help us to scour all the social media channels, wider internet channels, whether that's nationally or in a specific targeted regional location down to a postcode. And it helps us to understand what our customers are saying about our brand, about our events, our experiences right now as they're happening. And this information, is so rich and it's so helpful because it means that everything we do, from the organic social content we post or the hashtags we use to the paid media that we decide to run, or even the types of drinks that you're running at a specific event, all of these things can be tailored and tweaked live time thanks to social listening, and it means that everything we do is consumer and insight driven, and has the best possibility of success too. And finally, it's just to say that don't be afraid to be brave as well. The brands that we remember positively once all of this is over and things get back to normal have a real chance of building positive sentiment for their brands. So when you create your ideas and plans, step back and think what that could turned up just one notch, and if it's within the boundaries of brave, it's not tipping into dangerous or contentious, then why not give it a go? This is a time when there's going to be a lot of noise, so being brave and standing out will give your brand a really good chance of winning from all of this. Okay, so just to sum up, well, hopefully, it's clear that with the right approach, we can still deliver amazing experiences that our audience crave. Yes, COVID has changed the landscape, but in many ways, it's opened up these new routes and new opportunities to create more meaningful, richer, and more memorable experiences too. And our audiences are crying out for something to look forward to, something that will make them feel again. So, let's make the most of this huge opportunity. It's just down to us as brands, to deliver that for them. We've got to make it happen, and we've got to make it happen safely, responsibly, but really importantly, it's got to be done in an exciting way too. So cool. So that's it in terms of our slides. Really hope there were some nice insights, some nice ideas there for you. We've had a couple of questions come in on the panel, which I'm going to run through now. But just so you all know, I will follow up and send all the slides, so a link to this presentation out later on too. So feel free to share that with any of your colleagues. I'll also pop in the email a link to our diary too, just in case anyone would like to have a bit of a further chat around anything we've discussed today. So cool, so let's just jump into questions. So I've just got a couple come in. Andy and Jodie, if you wouldn't mind just taking these for us. So first up, we've had a question in asking, is it more expensive to run your own events than participate in large national events?
I suppose the quick answer to that one is no, it really doesn't need to be more expensive. I think the first thing to say is that by hosting your own event in your own space is that immediately you've written off that big gate fee that you quite often have to pay with event partners. So you could easily be spending 50 to 100k just on securing a space at a big festival or a big event. So all of a sudden you can reinvest that money in costs that arguably are going to work a lot harder for you. The other thing to say, of course, is that it's scalable. So, you know, your pop-up branded events could really be governed by how much budget you want to spend on it. I showed an example earlier of the Utopia Blue Monday pop-up, but I also showed an experiential bike that went round the city streets. So there's lots of ways of delivering similar results in different scaled solutions. The other important note to mention about brand-owned events is that you're also taking away a lot of the restrictions that you might otherwise see at big festival or event partners. So you have much more control about what you want to achieve. So you get that autonomy. So in answer to the original question, no, absolutely not. The branded events can definitely be more cost effective than the big festival partners.
Yeah, perfect. All right, awesome, thank you. And we've got one more, which kind of lends on that nicely. Actually, it's if there are any brand owners out there, you know, who might not have finalised their plans for the 4th of July. Obviously, that's creeping up very quickly. You know, do they still have time to turn these things around? You know, ideas and activations we've spoken about today.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Daz. I think, again, absolutely. I think the beauty of a lot of the ideas that we've shared today is that they can actually be really quick to turn around. You know, gone are the days of months of planning ahead of doing activations. We're needing to work in new and interesting ways. So, yeah, I think with the right approach and with the with the right kind of view and lens on what we're doing, then absolutely these ideas are quick to turn around.
Cool, thank you, Jodie. Wicked. Well, that's it, guys. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for your time and for the questions that came in. Please keep an eye out for the email that I'm going to be popping out, you know, with the link to the webinar. We'll also be doing, you know, more of these as the months come. So I'll send out all the information to you guys on those up and coming ones too. So yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you all soon. Cheers.